Harvard Divinity School.
100 Years Rudolf Steiner, December 15th and 16th, 2025.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I would also like to welcome you here to this really very interesting session. And I think in general, a very exciting convention. It's so diverse and broad. I rarely attended other conventions and conferences with this breadth of different topics. And of course, I would like to thank the organizers to give me an opportunity to make a small contribution to this breadth of contents here. And I will talk about a topic here, Rudolf Steiner's participatory insights into the world of microbes in nature and human beings as an outcome of his Goethean research approach. So usually this Goethean research approach is applied very often to objects of the living world, also from physics, but at least which you can perceive by your common sense organs, eyes, your ears, whatever, you can touch them. And these are the objects which actually give you something to guide you to the world of ideas, to formative forces, which are actually representing these objects. And I'm interested, and here these typical objects, examples for us have been for a long time plants, animals, landscapes, and I refer mainly here to objects of the living world. And you're familiar with it, most of you, I think, and this has been elaborated on by many researchers, followers and students by Rudolf Steiner, and even today. There's one field of objects which we are aware of, but actually which has been studied only very little regarding this Goethean approach. And these are microorganisms, bacteria. The reason might be actually somehow also obvious because these organisms, they are unnoticed. We don't see them. They're everywhere, and now we are actually aware of them, but how to actually get any indication of their presence? What we usually do, and this has been done since actually 300 years now, to use a microscope. And there is just here this picture on the down on the right. You see little dots or little things under the microscope. But what does it mean really? What do you see? Are these the organisms, or what is it? And usually what is missing here is a context of these little creatures, whatever they are, because when you look at a plant, a rose or a sunflower, or you have a deer somewhere, you have the context. You know what kind of organism it is and where it lives, and so you can imagine the environment. But when you look at these microbes, it's a little bit comparable to if you take a sample of a tissue of an organism, put it under microscope, and when you know from where you put it, then you know what it is. But if you don't have any idea, then it's a big question. And usually that's the way we approach microorganisms. We don't have the right context. Today, it's a little different because I'm quite sure that hopefully, probably everybody here in the audience heard the word microbiome, because it's fashionable today. And thanks to many studies in the recent past, let's say the last decade or 20 years, we are aware how important microbes are. Because all the organisms are actually colonized by microbes, different types of microbes, and their entirety together, this is called the microbiome today. And this includes all microbes. And but also in a distinct environment. It might be an organism, it might be an ecosystem, it might be the entire Earth. But importantly, here, this term refers to the fact that they are interacting. They're not individual organisms, but there's a lot of interactions going on among the various organisms. And here, as an example, we have them on plants, even here in the soil, here in the roots, we have them in the water. All the animals actually are inhabited by these microorganisms. And we can actually say, based on lots of research during the recent past, that they are the hidden giants, invisible giants, and they're mediating and partially even controlling the global biogeochemical cycles or the elemental cycles, carbon, nitrogen cycle in the biosphere. And there are also the so-called integral components of the holobionts. And the holobiont is a new term which was actually created because when it was acknowledged that it's very often actually impossible to distinguish between the microorganisms colonizing a higher organism and the organism itself. So that's why we now talk about these holobionts. That's the situation today. But what about the state of knowledge on microbiology in the late 1900s and early 20th century? That was completely different. At that time, microorganisms were usually somehow related to diseases. They were first isolated from actually patients who had a certain disease, and one of the most important researchers at the time doing this type of work was Robert Koch. And he actually identified quite a few pathogenic bacteria, and he said they are the causes of a certain disease, infectious disease, and we have to fight against them. So we have to combat these pathogens. And he actually coined 3 postulates, I don't read them here, to actually make a clear-cut statement how to combat these pathogenic bacteria. And why I bring it up here is that this thinking is actually not, I would say, the thinking of actually life processes of the living world, but it is a typical way of 1900s thinking of the world of physics. You have a cause and effect. You have an organism, and then you have a disease. The organism, the pathogenic bacterium, is causing this disease. But this is very one-sided and not more than half of the truth, what actually you can say when you apply this type of approach. There were others, researchers at the time, like Max Pettenkofer, who actually thought differently. And then how about Rudolf Steiner? Actually, I skipped this because of time. Because there were environmental microbiologists at the time, a little later, who had a slightly different look. But Rudolf Steiner, he actually had a look at microorganisms which is completely comparable to our today's view on them. And this shows that obviously he was already thinking in the right way of the context of the way in which the microorganisms are embedded in their environment. Might it be an organism? Might it be nature? And here I will present this in 3 examples very briefly to illustrate this. Sorry. The first one, and here I just read this quotation, which is actually from a lecture of his lecture courses, Spiritual Science and Medicine. In cases of this disease, we have discovered such and such a bacillus. Such facts are of great interest to the study of the botany and zoology of the human organisms. But as regards the conditions of disease, they have at least only the significance of indicators enabling one to conclude that if this or that form of disease is present, the human organism thus affected offers appropriate soil for the growth of this or that interesting vegetable or animal microorganism. They mean this and nothing more. So he just takes them as an indicator of the organism, the patient, who actually offers the right environment that these pathogenic bacteria are able to proliferate. And even today we know that actually even in a healthy organism, in a healthy human, you can basically detect all these pathogenic bacteria. They're present. But our immune system actually holds them into a right balance because the other healthy and organisms which are actually also contributing to our well-being, they keep them actually under control. So Rudolf Steiner saw this. Then the next example, this is even more exciting, I think. And this, he mentions the relationship between the gut and the brain, digestion and thinking. And today, you might know about it, that actually the so-called gut-brain axis, it's one of the hot topics in microbiology and also in neurology. And because this was discovered very recently only, there's an intimate link between it. And Rudolf Steiner, he already saw this as well. There's also from the same lecture here a quotation. If you look at the flora of the mountains and meadows, you must recognize in them the same forces that you evolve in your thoughts when you live in representation and feeling. That's one thing. So what you actually see here, when you have these wildflower meadows, they're actually bound forces, which are also we are using when we are thinking. And then the other thing, a couple of pages later. And the humble vegetation of your intestines differs from the external flora because the latter does not have to be deprived of the thoughts. Thoughts are inherent in the external vegetable world. For indeed, if you did not deprive the formative powers, you would not be a thinking being. You take away from your intestinal flora what the flora out in nature still retains. And here he even mentions microorganisms. And what you can actually see as a kind of summary, when we look in nature and on plants, they're the microbes, the microbial organisms, actually they form the compost and give all the higher plants the possibility to dwell and develop and then to bind these formative forces in the physical world in their form. And we, as human beings, have actually the intestinal flora and also the microorganisms there. They digest and decompose the organic matter, usually from vegetables. We eat and then digest. But this is the basis for our ability to think. And in a different lecture, he even went further and said that these microorganisms in our digestive system, the bowel system, they actually form a spiritual brain in our gut. And our physical brain is just a kind of mirror image of what is actually created in our bowel system. So he actually had this connection, the gut-brain axis, in his, I would say, Goethean way, or the ability to really relate the observations to what is actually behind in a higher realm, actually creating these different relationships. Then example number 3, and this relates to agriculture. We had in the this session already the biodynamic farming mentioned, and one important thing of the biodynamic farming are actually the so-called biodynamic preparations. And here there are quite several of them, and I will just refer to the horn manure preparation. And here also a quotation from Rudolf Steiner from the agricultural course when he describes and introduces the horn manure preparation. When you bury the cow horn filled with manure over winter, you obtain an extraordinarily concentrated, life-giving manuring force in the content of the cow horn. The horn manure preparation transmits this manuring force to the soil. And later on in this lecture also he says that the important things are the, as he calls them, parasites, microorganisms here, which are also transmitters of this manuring force from the horn manure preparation to the soil. And there have been now actually studies, and one, I think, very important study came out last year, which actually analyzed the composition of the microbiota, the microorganisms in the horn manure preparation here by actually state-of-the-art microbiological techniques, by so-called DNA fingerprinting techniques. And so this study was able to show that in the horn manure preparation, the so-called plant growth promoting bacteria were enriched. And these are bacteria which are able to produce plant hormones or actually stress mitigating features. And then this was transmitted actually by sprayed over the soil. And there also later on, a couple of weeks later, the same enrichment of bacteria was also detected on the soil treated with this horn manure preparation. So obviously, there is also a transmission, of this, the manuring, forces from the preparation to the soil, and actually then as a basis for the crops. And this was done on fields in Germany and in France here. And there again, 100 years ago, in 1924, Steiner actually realized something, a relationship between these microorganisms in this preparation, and which we can today actually detect and say by our common science and analytical techniques, he was right in saying this. And so he was able, in a way, 100 years before, kind of natural science, to actually see and realize these relationships, with his spiritual approach, the Goethean approach. So these are the conclusions, but actually I skipped them because time is running out, and I don't know whether we have any time for discussions. Thank you for your attention.
Sponsored by the Program for the Evolution of Spirituality.
Copyright 2023, the Preston Fellows of Harvard College.